Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's JANZSSA professional development session with Dr. Abbe Winter, titled Want to Write About Your Practice? Ethics for Student Services Professionals. And a very warm welcome to Dr. Abbe Winter. Dr. Winter is a results-driven academic writing wellbeing coach, mentor, and independent researcher, skilled in the analysis of words and data for user needs. While her PhD focused on what helps workers in higher education cope with large-scale organisational change, and she was part of the small team that created and developed the concept of academagogy, which is the scholarly leadership of learning. Her more recent research has focused upon professional identity, developing academic writing well-being, and reflective practice. Welcome, Abby, and thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, Natalie. Lovely to be here. Begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the lands where we are. I'm on the lands of the Turrbal and Yugara people in Mianjin, which we know as Brisbane. These have always been lands of teaching and learning and research and sharing and creative practice and storytelling. And I acknowledge the elders past, present and emerging and the importance of these lands and winds and waterways. If anybody else would like to add into the chat the lands where you are coming from, please feel free to do so. All right, so the plan for today is that I am going to talk for about 40 minutes, give or take. Please feel free to jump in with questions throughout. Don't feel that you have to wait until the end. And hello, Hayley Key. Lovely to have you here. I may be leaning on your knowledge. And at the end, we will also have time for questions as well. I've given you links to all of the places on the internet that I am. But as Hayley said, I'm a bit of a mixed bag. I'm not an academic in that sense, but I do have a PhD, which I got, oh good Lord, 13 years ago now. So I've been kind of thinking about people in a researchy way for a long, long time. Most of my career and most of my day job is at QUT, Queensland University of Technology. But most of my career has been as what we call professional staff. So I'm not an academic doing research for a living. I'm professional staff, probably like most of you, doing the administrative and support kind of work across the university. I did a lot of stuff in course development and evaluations, and corporate data were my background in the past life. These days, I'm a researcher developer working with our students and staff to help them with whatever, from the germ of an idea, planning a project, through to Abby being writing coach and clean eyes on things before they get submitted out into the world. I describe myself as having a hungry brain. So, lifelong learner. This is why we're at universities, right? All right. So as a professional staff member, I never really had to think about ethics. I had to think about risk management and change management in the projects that I was doing, but not the ethical side in the way that researchers think about ethics. So if you're going to be putting out into the wider world beyond your university anything that somebody else has said, then you actually do need to have formal ethical approval to do so. Not only because of privacy requirements, although they're a large part of it, but also because we have a responsibility to make sure that nobody is harmed. And in the international community, this largely came about from a few things, but one of them was the Tuskegee experiments that the United States Centre for Disease Control, CDC, did from the 1930s through to the 1970s, where they looked for Negro males with syphilis that was untreated, and they followed them through to death and even to autopsy, and they never told them that they actually had been diagnosed with syphilis. They just told them they had bad blood. Obviously, there are other, horrendous things that happened in concentration camps in the 1940s and other places. But for me, it's the Tuskegee experiments that really were the big catalyst for needing to have ethics when you are doing things to or with people other than yourself. And these days, we also have data integrity requirements around what we do with data that we collect. So, no, that's not going to go. There we go. So, as I said, ethics is necessary if you're going to be using other people's words or information. Ideally, you want to get your ethical approval before you talk to anybody. So if you're going to be running a project where you're going to have stakeholders come in and tell you what's wrong with the system, or look at your proposed solution and give you feedback on that, and then you might want to write an article for JANZSSA about, we changed the system, we improved the process, and here's what we found and what we did. And as part of that, you want to include, this is what the people said. And its underlying purpose is to treat people like people. So there are times that you definitely do and times that you definitely don't need ethical approval. And there are also the grey times in between where you might want to talk to somebody else about it. So this little table that I'm showing gives you a few of the fairly clear examples. If I've done a project and asked people to fill in an evaluation at the end of it, how pleased are you with the product or with the training that I gave or whatever it was? And I might give them some, happy, like it scales, 1 to 5, 1 to 7, smiley faces, grumpy faces. And I might give them a couple of open-ended, please add anything else you'd like to tell us. If I want to use any of that data, we got an average of 4 out of 5 on the scale. A respondent said, this was the best managed project I've ever had the pleasure of being a part of. You will need ethical approval to do that. If I'm writing a reflective piece about my role in a project, I don't need ethical approval because it's me. And, even researchers do that. I have a whole book, there we go, where we took designers out into healthcare around the COVID times. And, we've got a fairly decent sized 400 odd page book out of that project. One of the 20 projects in there had ethics approval. All of the others didn't. We were just doing them as continuous improvement projects for Queensland Health. But we still managed to write about what we did because the designers and the researchers did it. And part of that was, if you look at that third bottom row, using quotes from participants who are also co-authors on the publication. So that's, I won't call it a way of getting around ethics, but authors can use their own words. So if you invite a couple of students who are part of your steering committee to write with you about what happened, you will get participant views, but you won't need to have done ethics to get them there. If you want to show photographs of people, you absolutely need their approval to do so. And the bottom one, case studies, it comes down to, are you going to actually show people. So we have a question in the chat. Would you need ethics approval if you were doing a scoping paper instead of already published work? So a scoping paper looks at what's out in the world. So you do not need ethics approval to use what's already out in the world that's published. Okay, so I work with a lot of researchers in my current roles, and I spend a lot of time telling them how much I love doing ethics, because ethics forces you to think through the whole plan. It's like your project plan for doing, in this part of the world, the research, but in your part of the world, the stuff you might want to actually write about for your project. I'll keep calling it a project. It could be continuous improvement. It could be whatever it is that you're doing that you might want to write about. There are different levels of ethics. Most of what I expect we will be doing would be low risk. So we're not actually trying to injure people in any way. And we're not talking to them about things that could be traumatizing. If you want to do that, that would go through what's called a high-risk ethics application, where you have to explain why you want to do the things that may be troublesome to the people, and how you will mitigate and why doing this work is of greater benefit than not doing it. At my university, we can also get ethics to use existing data. So in one of my past lives, I worked in the central university data area, and we would quite often get requests from academics of, oh, I have ethics approval to do a project on architecture students over the past 20 years. Can you please give me all of that data now? Sure, hand over, not individual student names and numbers, but whatever data was needed. One of the big things to think about is, are you going to be asking for data? And I use data in the broadest sense of, it could be people's words and comments. It could be people filling in a survey for you. It could be using pictures of them, anything that is personal to a person. Think about their vulnerabilities. Are you asking, first-year students to do a thing? There's going to be a power differential there. They may feel obliged to do things. In my son's first year of university, he did every student survey that was out there. And then in his second year, he was like, well, I'm only doing it actually for the units that I love or I hate. I'm not going to do every survey every time. First Nations people, people can have gender-based vulnerabilities. People can have ability-based vulnerabilities. So you need to, part of the ethics process is thinking through, are there people who may be more vulnerable than others? I mean, I'm a middle-aged, middle-class, privileged white woman. So I don't have a lot of vulnerabilities, but I have some. Others have more or less. So, think about your people as people. The other thing I will say is getting institutional ethics approval to do anything is a time-consuming process. And a lot of what's coming up soon is actually going to be walking you through what my university, what QUT's ethics process looks like. Natalie and I were discussing at her university, the ethics process is actually probably more. At other universities that I've worked at, it was less. So things vary, but it's not just, I'm running a workshop tomorrow. I really want to be able to write an article for JANZSSA about what everybody says. Let me just put in an ethics application. It's at my university, it's 2 to 4 weeks before they even look at it. And then they normally spend a couple of weeks with it, send back changes and questions and more for you to think about. Then you have to make the changes, put them back in, they get looked at again. Sometimes they come back again with, oh, okay, if you're doing that, then you're going to have to think about this. Sometimes at that point they say, yes, okay, go ahead, you can do the thing. So it's not an overnight process. If it's too late and you desperately want to write for JANZSSA or somewhere else about what you've done and you've already got the data, you can apply for ethical approval to use the existing data. They are likely to request things like making absolutely certain that your participants are not identifiable in any way. But again, a reminder, I've pulled out half of that previous table to say there are ways that you can still write about your project that's finished if you want to do it in an ethical way. Okay, so it's not just researchers who do research ethics. Normally, it will be the project leader, but it may be your change manager. It may be someone else. It may well be you. If you want to write about it, you might have to take the responsibility of doing the ethics. But anybody whose name will go onto the article with you needs to be part of that ethics approval so that they also can have the access to the data. And they should be engaged as well. Okay, if you're not sure of anything, ask. I'm going to say, in my experience, every university has a research ethics team, ethics advisors. In my university, we have a central team who can help departmental people, and we also have people out in each faculty. So the Faculty of Business has research ethics people. The Faculty of Creative Industries has research ethics people. And Michelle is, wait. All right. I found Michelle's question in the chat. Sorry, it was compacted up in something else. If you copy a student experience survey from a university to use in your study hub, i.e. with ethical approval that the university would have done, if you did a survey and didn't have ethics approved, then sorry. Okay, so it's two questions. If you copy a student experience survey from a university to use in your study hub with ethical approval from that university on the basis of, all right, if it's a different university's ethics approval, you would need to know what their ethics covered, because there is an option to ask for not just now, but also later. So, Michelle, if, for example, you were one of the named people on that original university's ethics application, and that application said, and we would like to be able to use this data for future projects, then yes, you are covered by that permission. If you were not, if somebody's just said, here, I did a student experience survey, here's everything, off you go, you would need to do a brand new application to use anything from it. Okay. And if you did a survey and didn't have ethics approval and then you later get the ethics approval, can you consider the data already collected to be covered? No. Again, your university's ethics approval for that will probably give you guidance, but I would expect that you might have to resend to the original list, at the very least, the ethics information sheet explaining what the project is, what data will be collected, how it will be used, how it will be kept. But your university's ethics team will actually give you more explicit instruction on what to do and how. Alrighty. So all of that is a long way of saying, if you're not sure, reach out and ask. Okay, so as I've said, different universities have different templates, forms, systems, processes for handling research ethics, but they're all informed by that national statement that I showed you at the beginning. And broadly, you need to be able to explain who you're going to be researching. Who are your participants who will be answering your survey, coming to your workshop, talking to you in the interviews. How are you going to collect the data? And how are you going to make sure that it's not damaging to them or to you and anybody else who's part of your team? You'll have to, data integrity, you're going to have to talk about how you'll store the data, how you'll share the data, whether you'll be able to use or reuse. At my university, all of that breaks down into 8 sets of questions. So it's 8 screens worth of an online app that has to be filled in. The first set is broadly, tell me about the project. What is it? What's it called? What are you going to be doing? And the example I'm using here is from a 12-week writing program that I ran where I did a pre and post survey with people about their writing habits and beliefs and self-efficacy. I have to tell them who's going to be doing this research. We then have to talk about risks and benefits. Because most of what I do is relatively low risk, I tend to have a couple of go-to things. People might have a bit of mild discomfort in thinking about the way that they do whatever the thing is. There's definitely going to be some inconvenience in the time that it's going to take them to do my survey or do the interview or come to the workshop or whatever it is that you're asking them to do. I generally don't have a big, broad, as a result, you will get something out of it. I'm, as part of the introduction, Natalie said, I'm an independent researcher, which means people don't pay me to do my own research. So this project I'm doing for fun. So I don't have $25 or $50 to give my participants gift cards as thank yous. So I broadly say they might get some benefit out of reflecting on their own practice, and broadly there might be scholarly benefits that come in whatever, if and when I publish about it. But depending on what you're doing, you may give people morning tea during the workshop, whatever it is. Your students as partners may get paid as part of doing the work. There may be benefits. The next questions that I have to answer around recruitment. So who am I going to target? Are there any inclusion or exclusion or screening that will happen? So yes, only the people doing my writing program will be invited to do the survey about my writing program. How will they give consent? So with a survey, generally doing the survey is the consent. With an interview, we will normally ask people to sign a consent form to say, yes, I am willing to be talked to about this. How are we going to collect the data? So in this case, I'm doing a survey. I will also take my own notes throughout the 12-week workshop series and do my own reflections about what people say and do. My survey is non-identifiable. I don't ask for names or numbers or anything. If I'm talking to people or I'm in a workshop with people, that makes them individually identifiable. In a workshop, they are also identifiable to each other. So when you finally, write your piece and it's published in JANZSSA, your participants in your workshop may want to read it and go, oh, that was Tom, that was Bob, that was Sam. So you may then have to describe how you will anonymize those people. Okay, so Haley said that at her university, you cannot apply for retrospective ethics approval. And then Kay has asked, are there ways we can include students as authors? Absolutely, yes. You're interested in how we challenge the separation between those that have the experience and those who research the experience. Yeah, I have publications that I did when I was at Griffith University with students from the Honours College, where I created little mini projects. We worked on them together with me as a mentor to give them research experience as honours students to see if they wanted to go on into masters and PhDs. And at the end of that, I found a conference. And so we all presented at the conference. And out of that conference, there was a proceedings. So they then got published in the proceedings. And from that, we were actually invited to write a book chapter together. So there are definitely and absolutely invite students on, give them, I'm a big proponent of giving students a voice in what we're doing. Alrighty. So the next thing that my university asks for in terms of the application is actually all the bits of paper. So I have to upload the indicative questions that I'm going to ask in my survey. They're not necessarily full and final, and my university understands that. Again, depending on what you're doing, will depend whether it needs to be the absolutely, these are the questions I will be asking and no others. These are the kinds of questions I will be asking. I may, reread them, tweak the words, read some theory and go, that's a good thing to include. But I still have to broadly follow the guideline that I've given. If I'm sending out an email to recruit people, that wording has to be part of the whole ethics application. We have to do, as I said before, there's an information sheet that goes to participants that says, this is what this research is about. These are the risks to you. This is how we're going to try and make sure that we don't, The workshop will be scheduled during a normal work day, so it won't be out of hours or weekends or asking for anything massively major. The interview will be scheduled online at a day and time that suits you, the participant, whatever you're going to do. There's also then the consent form that you have to sign. There may be other documents that need to be attached depending on what you're doing. At the end of our form, it then says, is this a funded project? Because again, if you're being funded to do this, they'll go back and say, are you giving your participants some sort of remuneration or something as a thank you for the time that they're giving you? Is this the only university reviewing it? So going back to Michelle's question earlier, if Michelle had been part of that initial ethics application, but also wanted to use it at her university, it may be that, the initial university is the primary and they will look at it, but then Michelle's university also wants it on their records. So in that case, I would say no rather than yes. Some of my researchers do work with the Queensland Department of Education, which has its own whole ethics process. So they have to do the QUT ethics process first, and then it goes to the Department of Education process before they're allowed to send anything out to teachers. So sometimes the university is not the only place that looks at it. Again, Hayley, please feel free to jump in. I have always presumed that the Customs Act and Defence Trade Controls Act is kind of a broad thing across the whole country, where basically I have to say whether or not I'm going to be dealing with things that bad agents might be interested in. And yes, all right, so that was the end of the ethics application for my university. Natalie has also provided a couple of extra questions that her university asks. So, has it been peer reviewed? And if you say no, you get the pop-up saying, we actually need you to have this peer reviewed before we can go ahead and look at it. So at my university, on the first page, they ask basically for the broad case for why this research needs to happen. So for some projects, it's, this is a funded project by the Department of Education. It has therefore already been through a review process in order to be funded. But here's still a little bit of reasoning. If it's not externally funded, it may be, this project is a strategic priority for the university. They are investing $2 million across 3 years to make sure that we update the student stuff. Thank you for that, Hayley. All good. Yeah, okay, so Hayley's saying different places, different orders. So yeah, peer review doesn't necessarily just mean have academics looked at it. It can be, the university has peer reviewed this project that you are doing to improve the student system or the staff system, or, we are implementing students as partners, and the student success program have decided that this is a priority for us and they are funding whatever. Or you might just say it has, at my university, I can say it has not been through a formal peer review process. However, the literature suggests that students as partners is definitely the way to go. So this research is going to talk to a cohort of engineering students and see if there is interest among them for a pilot students as partners scheme, whatever it is you're doing. All right, I'll talk through the other half of what Natalie has sent me, and then I'll come to Tracy Madonna's question. So in Natalie's university, there is an explicit request to actually talk about risks to the project team. So I try to include that in my stuff, although it's not an explicit question for me. But, at Uni of Southern Queensland, you have to explicitly say, staff will be travelling to, from the Toowoomba campus to the Ipswich campus. Therefore, there is, travel and risk and whatever. They're going places and staying overnight. We're going to make sure there's 2 people going, whatever it might be. All right. So, Tracy Madonna, you have a project coming up where a paid student as staff member will be a project officer, and you'll be creating a student focus group to give feedback on resources. The project officer and you plan to use the process of the project in a conference presentation. The focus is going to be on the process, what worked, what didn't, using student-informed feedback. It won't be individual data, it will be collated data from the focus group. You will need ethics approval to use anything from that focus group. So if it was just you and your student project officer and your own personal reflections without any reference to the focus group said, you'd be okay. But the moment you say the focus group said, the focus group recommended, 3 people in the focus group hated option 2. You need ethics because you are representing and representing through your own lens the views of the individuals in the focus group. So, sorry, but you will need ethics to use anything from that focus group. The other thing we should talk about is the beastie in the room, which is AI. So, JANZSSA very kindly have an AI policy which says if you use them, you must declare it. AI cannot be a co-author. Do not get it to do your writing for you. The human always has to be in the loop and taking responsibility for anything that comes out of the AI. Personally, I dislike generative AI on 2 moral reasons. One, it's almost all trained on stolen data, and the data, the people who created the data that it's trained on have never been recompensed for that. 2, it's an environmental nightmare with the data farms that it takes to run it and the water and electricity that they consume. So I tend to avoid AI, but I completely get that for a lot of people, it's an easy way to improve your writing, to even help you with the analysis. 2 things that I warn people. Firstly, if you're going to use it, you make sure you are following your university's policy or guidelines around it, and make sure that whatever you put into it goes into a private session, so it's not using your data to keep training the big wide world version. And I was at a conference 2 months ago with Inga Mewburn, the thesis whisperer, who said, and she's a professor in architecture at ANU down in Canberra, and she said what she tells her students is that right now the AI detection software is not good enough to absolutely say whether or not a student has used it, but that doesn't mean that in the future it won't get better. And she said, we could run your PhD through it, and if you've used the AI when you're not meant to, we could take your PhD away from you. So, for me, AI is a big flashing alarm bell, but I completely understand how and why people use it. So be compliant, follow the policies as they are written and stated. Alrighty, we only have a couple more things to get through. Once you've done the ethics, you've filled in the forms, you've clicked submit, you've done everything, you've got the approval to go, you're not done. You still have to store. The data that you collect has to be securely stored as per whatever your university's ethics requirements are. Any signed consent forms from people to say, yes, you can use my words, or signed image releases, yes, you can use my photograph, have to be stored. Again, different places, different requirements. The other thing to think about is, I think it's the Australian Research Data Commons, ARDC, have fair data use. They believe that data should, if it's collected, it should be shared. So it needs to be findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. So if you have ethics approval to collect data from your project, you may feel an obligation to share that data so that others doing similar projects can learn from your data, not just from what you've written for JANZSSA. The policies are there, and the slides, as well as the recording, will be shared afterwards, so you can go back to all of these links. If you are not affiliated with a university, some university ethics review will still take applications from people outside of the university, and actually it's a requirement from the Australian Human Research Ethics Committee that some do so. So there are still ways, and the link will take you to the places. So we are 1 minute ahead of time. Are there any more questions or comments, or anything that's still burning? If not, Natalie, back to you.
Thank you so much, Abby. That's been absolutely fascinating to listen to. I've done a few ethics applications myself, and at first they can seem really overwhelming. But I find that once you kind of get started, you kind of get into them a little bit more. What would be your top tip for someone who is doing their ethics application for the very first time?
Find a friend. Call, take someone out for coffee. If you know anybody in a faculty, an academic, ask them what it's like. If, reach out to your faculty or your university research ethics center and say, hey, can I talk to somebody? Can you show me an example? Can you tell me what it's like? It feels like this massive thing. And the first few I did, I got so many things back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. It's like anything, the more you do it, the easier it gets. So the first one absolutely always feels horrendous and overwhelming. But, if you can find a friend, that's great. All right. Hayley, I'm going to ask you to say more about waiver of consent, because that's not something I ever ask people to do. But in the meantime, Belinda has said that she loves Inga Mewburn's research into the use of AI for academics. She acknowledged it co-authoring, yes. And you recommend her writing and research. Absolutely. Inga is at the forefront of playing with the toys and the tools and figuring out. She also has a podcast with Jason Downs called On the Reg, R-E-G, which is a great listen, and they talk a lot through toys and tools and all the things. Hayley works with an ethics team in a public hospital. So this is waiver of consent. It's part of everything that you do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So waiver of consent is part of your national statement. I would, if you're doing an ethical application, I would highly recommend that you get up the national statement on human research. There's a new one being launched July, I believe. I'm on annual leave at the moment, so I believe it's July. Waiver of consent, we use that a lot in hospitals where researchers are going back and looking at patient files. So they might take a period of time, so from January 1 to December 31, 2025, and they want to look at incidences of asthma in people over 65. Now, they can't have an idea of how many patients will have presented to an ED within that time. It is unreasonable that they can go to every single person in that data set to obtain individual informed consent. And the data that they are collecting is de-identified. So they'll only come out with there might be, say there's 500 people in that data set, they'll come out as numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Their unique hospital number, we call it a URN in Victoria, their name, their date of birth, etc., will be missing from the data set. They may include an age, which can come out of the data set, but it's unreasonable that anyone will be able to identify themselves in that data set. They also need to do things like state that they're only going to present aggregated data. So they're not doing a case study, they're not writing about an individual person. they're writing about a group of something, an event or an incident, or in this case, a health problem. But it's unreasonable that they can get consent. So they then apply to the ethics committee as part of their ethical application for a waiver of consent. I am happy to put my email address, even though it's not Queensland, if anyone's interested. It's Australian-wide, the national statement. If you've got any
Thank you,
questions,
Hayley.
I can help with.
Appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you. I'll chip in there too because I have done something similar. It wasn't a waiver of consent, but I did put through an ethics application to access institutional data, and that was de-identified student data. There are some rules at universities around that, and so if that's something people are interested in doing, is getting some of that institutional data that your university collects. So, for example, it could be QTAC data or LMS usage data, that kind of thing. Have a chat to your university ethics committee, and they'll be able to talk you through that process.
And one thing, just while we're sitting and processing, one thing that I do, which not everybody at my university does, our consent form for people to sign and say, yes, you can use my words or my whatever I've produced at the workshop, just has, a signature space, basically. I mess around with mine. I give my participants the agency and the option to choose a pseudonym that they might want to be known by. That way, if they want to be known by their actual name, they can write that down. If they want to be Sam, that's fine. It's a gender neutral name. So I give them that choice to pick a name. The other thing I do is for participants who don't, who do that and leave it blank, I will do a very broad, rough, most of my participants here are university students, so they were probably born round about 2005, are we up to these days, maybe? So I will actually go and do a quick Google search of, what were the top, however many people I have, 100 boys' names in the year 2005. And that then becomes my list of participant pseudonyms, because we don't want to say, Hayley said. I would much rather say Sam said as a gender neutral. But, think through stuff like that. And if you need to mess around with the forms, do. And if your ethics people hate it, they will come back and say, no, take that rubbish off the form. I've never had them do that to me. So, Natalie, handing back to you to do the grand advertising about what's coming next with JANZSSA.
Thank you so much, Abby, and thank you for answering those questions. Absolutely amazing. And so thankful to have you here today to look at all these things. So coming up, we currently have open a call for papers to JANZSSA. So now you all know about ethics. So I hope you have some great topics in mind. We are always on the lookout for peer-reviewed and professional papers, book reviews and interviews. If you're not sure, get in touch with us. We can help you with that. We have also put out a call for contributions to our JANZSSA Voices from the Field. This is a really great way to add your voice and perspective to the conversation. You only have to write 75 to 150 words, and this issue, our prompt is, how can we strengthen collaboration between academic and professional teams to deliver seamless student-centered support? Which I think is front of mind for all of our student service professionals. So the QR codes are there on the side of the screen, but you can also just go straight to our website as well. We also have more professional development coming up for you this year, so please keep a lookout for our webinar series. The next one is actually coming up next week, preparing and submitting an abstract for the JANZSSA conference with the wonderful Megan Posey. Megan has also got some upcoming Shut Up and Write workshops as well, which are fantastic. You just get so much done during those time slots. It's fantastic. And also we have our writing coaching program as well. Please keep that a look in. We're always happy to work with you to develop your ideas into a paper. So that's it from us today. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope you all have a fabulous rest of the day and that you're enjoying this cooler weather.
Thanks, everyone.